Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rafa. In preparations and anticipation of the conclusion of the Proving Grounds Summer 2021 tournament ending this weekend, starting on Thursday, we are joined here by Jensen Go, who is the Immortals Academy head coach, one of the last four teams still remaining in the tournament between Immortals, Golden Guardians Academy, Team Liquid, Academy and 100 Thieves Academy. These four teams will be battling out to determine who will be the Proving Grounds Summer 2021 champion. First of all, Jensen, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. And this year has been really, really interesting for you as a coach in particular because you've gone through essentially two different rosters between spring and summer. And I kind of want to just get into your brain and talk about what was the overall growth of Immortals Academy as a whole.
So first of all, thanks so much for having me here. It's definitely a pleasure to come here and take your questions. But let's just go back all the way to spring, right? Where Immortals for us was a full rebuild year for the entire organization. We brought a new coaching staff in all across the board from academy all the way up to LCS. And the thing was that for the organization, the number one objective for the academy roster was redundancy for the LCS team. How can we make it so that we can create a certain level of risk aversion for the ambitious project that the Immortals roster was creating at the LCS level? So what you've realized that for the academy team, unlike what a lot of the other academy rosters are doing, where they're trying to scout the latest 16-year-olds, the latest 17-year-olds, and then try to talk about this is their development pathway for them. For us, it's about immediacy. It's about what pieces can we bring in that can be core pieces for the LCS team 1 year down the road, 2 years down, 2 years down the road, right? And that is something that we had to look at because we didn't want to be in a position where if we needed to replace a player in LCS, the academy player was not ready to do that because this was a big factor that we were looking at when we were assembling the roster. So when we were moving from spring to summer, the same ideas continued. We looked at it, Viper and Under were available, and we said, hey, this is within the direction that we were looking for. So we decided to move and acquire them from the org. They definitely won it. They definitely proved themselves by winning Proving Grounds without having much support from any of the franchise organizations. So it's something that we did in order to stay in line with the direction that we are going, right? And in terms of the overall growth, I think there's a quite some of a timeline of sorts where we're looking at because of this shift in roster that we had. Unlike most of the teams where they were coming in from spring to summer, there was a lot of carryover, there's a lot of implicit things that the teams already knew how to work on as a unit of five. For us, there was a lot of relearning to be done. There was a lot of reintegration that had to be done for the team. And the fact that we chose to make this rather risky move moving from spring to summer by changing the roster resulted in us having to navigate visa issues, right? And I think most people know that it was only all the way up to week 6 where Dan Viper did an interview and said, hey, this is, or was it Joey who did the interview who said that, hey, this is where our season starts now. It's only in week 6 all the way there with only 3 weeks left of the regular season of Academy,
Yeah.
and we are just looking to peak towards playoffs. So for us, there was a deliberate consideration. There was a risk that was involved, and for us, it's a lot about planning and how do we manage the entire course of the season. I think for a lot of teams, they look at this and say that hey, we want to try to win every game. We take things one game at a time, and we try to win. We are always talking about how do we win the immediate game in front of us. Whereas for us, it's about understanding that these are the restraints we're working with. How do we load the schedule accordingly? How do we load the learning, and where do we try to peak and optimize the performance accordingly? And even all the way down when we were talking about hey, we're playing academy playoffs, right? At a point of time, we were experiencing some integration issues now that and the environment were finally in LA for a few weeks, and we said, hey, okay, the focus is going to be on Proving Grounds itself. Academy playoffs, yes, we would still like to win that, but the way we're going to load our practice, the way we're going to be loading in the effort, so that we are able to manage the factors of burnout, manage the factors of making sure the players were in the best shape when Proving Grounds comes around. These were all the things that we were thinking about. And I think that it kind of worked out for us at the end of the day as we moved into Proving Grounds itself, where I think we peaked about 1 week later than I would have hoped. But as we move into the final week, the level of motivation, the level of effort coming in from the players was really, really high. We'll come in there, we'll do scrims. After scrims, the players will go back, they'll watch their own VODs, and in the morning, we'll come in and the players will come up with all the individual points, just rewatching the scrims from the previous day and saying, hey, these are the things that we wanted to work on. These are the small details in the execution of the overall team vision that we had set previously
Mm-hmm.
in terms of what we needed to improve on. And I think that that's what allowed us to really search and see this large amount of improvement in proving grounds as compared to when we were in playoffs. We limped out in a 1-2-3 fashion against 100Ds, and then unfortunately we started off proving grounds 0-2 as well, right? But I think after that we hit a very nice stride of form, and I think that this season long kind of planning in terms of how we load the training is showing its results.
First of all, thank you so much for really giving me
That was
such
a long answer,
no,
sorry.
no, 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 no. I mean, it's you've really like given me a huge rundown to work with, and I think one thing that stuck out to me is even with the decision to change up the roster, getting uh and Viper to join the Immortals Academy roster, you couldn't effectively play with them at full strength because they were in Canada, and as you said, we couldn't get visa issues resolved until by week 6. At that point, there's only 9 weeks of the regular season in Academy. I think there's 36 games total of the season, and so already that means 24 games have already gone by where you could not put Viper in and to their best. So you have 3 weeks to effectively now get full 5-man squad in person scrim time with them, practice time, and on stage time. And the fact that they still managed to squeak in through top 6 for Academy playoffs is not only a good feat. Sure, you know, losing to 100 Thieves Academy for quarterfinals may have not been the ideal setting, but as you said, you guys still had proving grounds to look forward to in September, and now you guys are in the top 4. So you've already not only eclipsed your Academy playoffs standing, but you have also bested some really heavy contenders from the amateur scene. Wildcard and Resolved are no longer in the tournament, who are probably some of the top showings as a result of what we saw these past couple of weeks in September. And now looking forward to your match against Golden Guardians Academy, which is going to be on Friday. What has really defined Immortals Academy as their team identity? Because I know that when Viper and Anda were brought into the team, they had really kind of made their own name from the No Org squad that won Spring Proving Grounds in 2021 as like, all right, we play for top. It's this dynamic duo. We also have a really strong roster that is able to play without much resources and attention in, Value and Big on the bottom side of the map. Big rotates over to the top side, and then Fire can either be played towards or can also assist in snowballing Viper. Has that changed, in your opinion, for the Immortals Academy roster, since you have a powerhouse mid laner Pretty? You also have veteran and a long time professional players in Keith and Joey. Does that like change up the identity of Immortals Academy for you at all?
I think it definitely did. And a lot of the issues that we're having in Summer Split itself is that you had all these ways where all of these players have had their own various versions of success, right? Joey played at MSI. Keith was really he had I think even in the more recent part of his career had like successes. I think he made finals of Academy once. And I think Pretty was a very very successful mid laner back in the ERLs. Of course, Andy and Viper successful in their own ways. A whole list of accomplishments, right? The most recent of which is winning with no arc. And this is what in engineering, what we call integration hell, right? Where you have all the pieces that are good individually, but when you put them together, it doesn't really seem to work. So it's about working on what the communication is like between them, what is the synergy, and what's the implicit things that aren't being said and they're being assumed, that are resulting in miscommunications, misexecutions, or or in bad habits appearing in the way that we executed the gameplay itself, right? The resulting identity from the very beginning, I think that this is where I came in with a vision of how I wanted to play the game of sorts. Ever since spring as well, this is the idea that I model a lot of the way that I think about and the way I teach the game after the way that the LPL teams play, right? In particular FPX, where it's a lot about controlling the side lanes and is this using the system. Where I even did a YouTube video all the way back on it. Even before join Immortals, where the game is dictated by the way that you control the side lanes and you use that to create opportunities on the map.
Mm.
So that was the core idea that we had to integrate the players around. And I think that the way that we play around that, where if you watch the way that we play, so this game comes down to the idea of defending D minuses, where minus being where the wave is pushed into you, and attacking on the plus, where you have the ability to create a deep pushing wave and then access the opponent's jungle and attack the opponent in their jungle. Right, and I think that this is the thing that differentiates us from a lot of the other teams that you see here. And I just want to shout to Resolve because I think that they were the only other team that were approaching the game in such a manner. Right.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll talk a little bit more about Resolve earlier, later on maybe, but if we have the time to do that. But I think that that is the one unique thing. So when you watch Immortals play, you watch some of the other teams play. A lot of the other teams, what they do is that they'll farm out to a certain point. They play the more LCK style of macro, where they push out the side lanes, they converge on mid, and then they go from mid into an objective. For us, it's about going through sides. It's about attacking the opponents in the jungle, and then once we catch them snoozing, we're rushing them. We're taking their camps. We're catching the jungler doing his things. We're collapsing on the tier 2. We're diving people in the side lanes as well. And I
Okay.
think that there's a certain level of aggression, and it's been a learning process for this because it's a lot more sense of finesse towards it. So there were a lot of times where people were watching our games, right? Even during the regular season, it's like, yeah, Immortals were winning the game until they didn't, because we didn't get the key aspects of the style down, where we wouldn't bring the right number of people to attack the opponents in the jungle, and then they'll respond to TPs there, and it would result in a disastrous fight for us. So there was a certain trend to it, and it's just about getting the players to know, hey, this is your job in this situation, and this is how we've kind of formed the team identity. And
Mm.
as we move towards Proving Grounds as well, we added a second approach towards this as well, where it's still kind of like playing through its side, but we've enabled ourselves to play more scaling compositions, be able to play more, I wouldn't say passive style, because I would still say that we're very proactively looking to do things on the map. But if you notice that as we've progressed towards the tournament, we aren't just playing like double bruiser assassins in the solo lanes, and we've played some mages as well, a little bit of a throwback to the spring split, but still using Viper's strengths in being this hyper carry player to really assert pressure on the side lanes to continue to control the map.
Mm.
But in exchange of using the pressure it generates to continue to snowball the advantage, we're using it to buy space for the scaling components of the team to reach their scaling power points, such as Aphilis and Oriana.
Okay. Okay. And so basically that's where Keith and Pretty come in. So by playing off of Viper's immense pressure that he is creating through the side lane push, whether it's a 1-4 setup or if you're also giving the side lane duties to Pretty in a 1-3-1 setup, by playing off of side lane pressure, forcing teams to respond, you catch them out in the jungle per rotations to proactively look for picks, and therefore they have to respect whenever
Now this
they
is
are.
where
Yeah.
I have to be really pedantic, right? Because
Sure.
1-3-1, we don't do that here. It's always 1-1-3. And these are the
Oh,
magic
okay.
numbers,
Okay.
right? That I go through in general.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
see us being 1-3-1 and stuff, yeah, that's very small pockets of time, but we don't really default to that 1-3-1 kind of play style. I mean, but this might be going to the very pedantic micro details of the game,
Oh, that's
but this
completely
is this is
fine.
what I delve in. This is what I work on with the players. So look for these numbers. Look for these map assignments where the idea is about creating pressure to the side lanes and either attacking with the pressure or then using it to buy time for the rest of the team to achieve our scaling power points.
Okay. Okay. And so, let me get further into this because this the macro is always what fascinates me, especially at the highest level of League of Legends. When you look at a 1-1-3 versus a 1-3-1, does this kind of relate back to why you feel Immortals Academy is different than the other Academy teams, where you talked about the other Academy teams will play an LCK-esque style macro game where it's about using the majority of your players to push through mid lane to get mid control to then rotate into objectives, whereas by having the majority of your players pushing through a side lane, you know, is the objective then to to make picks in the jungle or to bleed like jungle resources away from the enemy team.
Right. So the core philosophy of the way I teach the game is that you determine your ability to be proactive on the map by having the ability to push in a side lane, right? So the entire goal of the way that I teach the game is if you can push in both side lanes, you can then have a buffet to do anything you want on the map. You can do anything you want of it. And conversely, if both your side lanes are pushed in, then you're kind of stuck because you can't go anywhere, right? You go in, you answer mid, and if you rotate to bot, you'll take everything on top side. If you rotate to top, you'll take everything on your bot side of the map. So you don't want to be in a situation. And the thing about teams that go through mid is that they don't put enough emphasis on defending the side lanes, and as a result, it allows us opportunities to be able to push that in. So let's go back to the topic of resolve for a little bit because that
Sure.
was the only other team that I've seen so far in Proving Grounds. I think I'm not sure if FlyQuest were doing it as well, but I didn't really have to scout for FlyQuest because we didn't have to play them. But Resolve was so interesting because they were the only other team that I've seen that actively played through 113. They connected the jungle support to defend the side lane waves. And we had to be very clear as to which side they were playing on so that we would not be matching them and then end up in a situation where we'll overload on that side, not be able to make progress, and the one on the other side is sneaking the wave against us. So it's hard to explain these things without drawing it on Rifkin, but the idea is that there's always like a yin and yang of the game, right? So when you watch like high level play, you see one team move down this way and then the other team is moving this way, right? Then it's going to shift back and then they'll take the turn, they reset, and they come on the other side and stuff. What happens is that when we play these styles, the idea is to play in a way to defend one side and be efficient on the other side using a pressure point, be it through the likes of in our case Viper, so that we're able to push out. We're able to push out both sides at the same time.
Yeah.
And for the teams that are going through mid, they go through mid. Sure, we might end up giving up some things in the mid lane, but as a result, wait, sorry, it's hard to draw. Now I feel like I'm making some
No, no, no,
cross
no, 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 no. You're fine.
hand symbols, right? Like the idea is that you want to push up both sides at the same time.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, even though they have pushed out mid, now they find themselves in a catch-22, right?
Yeah.
Because they have to answer both top and bot at the same time. So that's kind of what we aim for. And why
Mm,
Resolve was so interesting because they were the only other team. They were matching us on sides, and we had to be very careful about how we played. Or else we would just end up flipping fights in the jungle against them.
interesting. Okay. So, and just to clarify and to make sure, as play-by-play brain, trying to, I want to make sure I'm catching up on here by basically the traditional school of thought is that if you have the push mid lane, then you're able to easily, walk into an objective of your choice. However, if you take both side lanes and have the push, it's not like, yes, you may have to answer mid lane, but you are threatening with more than like an additional lane in, in conjunction with, the main side lane that a majority of your team is pushing through. And so then if you ever approach a system or a situation where there's a base race potentially, or even resources that can be bled from both sides of the map, whereas just the one central. You would you say that then your team is in a better position to threaten like structure damage, even if they threaten with like a central objective that is taken from the mid lane, or how are you able to kind of convince this idea is that it is better. It's just the idea that like, well, we get two inhibitors if they only get one, and then you have the ability to like just end the game from
Oh,
there.
of course, it's not all about just base racing by pushing out two side lanes, right? It's just that when you push out two side lanes, you get better access to opponent's jungle. It enables up better timings for you to
Right.
to go in. Like if you were to watch the way the Immortals Academy plays, I think the most interesting phase of the game, for people to watch would be about from 14 minutes, but when blades go down all the way to about 20 to 22 minutes, where Baron starts to become a very big objective, right? Because during these periods of time, and then if you look at it, okay, how are we making use of deep pushes to create pressure on the map? How are we using these deep pushes to create economic advantages? Going in, denying jungle camps away from the opponents, and then the neutral objectives becomes a bonus because naturally, if you have a deep push on the bottom side of the map, now dragon becomes your objective. on top of the other objectives as well, right?
Okay.
So what we do is we just keep the opponents dizzy. They want to go through mid, but they're just so overwhelmed. They have to answer top. They have to answer bot. That eventually that we time it in a situation where they have to answer top, they have to answer bot, and we are there on position to do the dragon while they are there. So we are still first on the objective at the end of the day.
Okay, okay. And and this actually makes a lot of sense because there are times where a lot of the teams will end up in what is seems like the NAA RAM where they're constantly trying to fight for mid lane control, but no one is catching sideways. And then what ends up happening is a lot of resources, both experience and gold, are missed out on because no one is catching side lane resources at all, right? Whereas Immortals are basically maximizing their resource income because they're ensuring that, like, okay, you know what? Even though we don't have, because you could have like a situation where a majority of your members are grouped up on, mid lane, but then it's more difficult for someone if you're getting ready for like X objective, if you're getting ready for Dragon on the bottom side of the map, by having majority of your members in mid lane, but then the other person top lane, no one is getting the bottom lane at the map. Whereas as long as you have one person top lane, one person mid lane, who's catching kind of like the majority of the members mid lane, and then you have the other majority there, you're ensuring you're getting every single lane worth of resources there.
I'm just amused and appreciating that now it's your turn to struggle with the hand movements to try to try to explain the movements around the map. This stuff is hard. I even have a rule when I discuss such things with players. I don't want to talk about any of these things unless there's Rift Kit open on the screen in front of us, right?
Right. Yeah. At this point, it's like we just need to bust out the paint tool and just be like, all right, boom, here, boom, and then it makes more sense. But we got to make do with
I
our
mean, this is the
hands.
evolution of the broadcast. It's like how you have in those traditional sports broadcasts. They bring out the charts, they bring out the pitch, and then they start
Yeah.
drawing with the axis and the O's. That's gonna be the future of it because it just makes it so much easier to just draw
Yeah.
all over it, graffiti all over it.
Oh man, there's so many times like in a like death segment, I wish that we had access to like not only the replay but also the ability just to draw over it. Like freeze frame here, this is where like X and X should be moving, and then you can kind of equate it to like traditional, as you said, sports broadcasts where you kind of see like this is the path they took, this is the path they should have taken to avoid X deficiencies, right? So, but getting back on track here, I this is really really cool to see how Immortals Academy are kind of just like breaking away from the mold as what you call it, as mostly the other academy teams go for traditionally. And now looking at the players on a more kind of like personal level, obviously, when people at home are watching the players on the screen, they see the name tag, but they don't see the person actually behind the screen. So, as someone who does get to interact with these five players on the daily, behind the scenes, behind the screen, outside of the game, what is like the personalities and the environment of Immortals Academy?
Well, I think it's a very friendly environment in general, right? I think across the board, these players they mesh really well, and I think for even while they weren't here, there's a certain level of interaction. There's lots of jokes happening, and it's very normal for us to after scrim say, hey, let's go to Dave and Buster's across the street. Let's go play some volleyball and stuff, right? Or engage in
Okay.
team activities. So I think it's quite normal for the players. It's kind of chill. There's a certain chill vibe towards it because I think for these guys, they're all veteran players, and like I said, they kind of in their mind they know what it takes to be there. They've been there, done that. So there's the kind of like air towards that team. Is the very cool, very confident. We're coming in here, we enjoy the company of each other, and it's just another day in the office for us. They respect the grind, they understand what it takes, but they don't put on immense amounts of pressure for themselves. And in fact, this is one of the more interesting teams that I've worked with because where I come from, coaching in the minor regions and stuff, is very do or die. It's a lot of very high in terms of pressure, right? So where the teams I work with, they're much the teams that work with in the past, they're very high on what they talk about the stress dash arousal curve, but that's a very nice sweet spot, right? In terms of the amount of stimulation, the amount of stress that you're receiving from the environment around you. So most of the time, I'm working with players that are too far right of that, and I have to try to move them left of this. And then for the players over here, it's about how do we move them right. And I think that this is one of the things that we work through as well. And I think that this is where Keith is showing his understanding of how what it means to be a good teammate and how does he bring the team up further to the right, right?
Mm,
Like I think the refs are hearing it. If you guys ever hear the team comms, Keith is always there. He's always yelling. He's always raising team morale. He's always the one giving the team speech, and he's the one who's always to bring the team together and unite
yeah,
the team and then get the
Toucan.
team pumped up and hyped up and making sure that everybody's ready to perform, not going into autopilot mode, right? Because especially if you're somebody who's I would say been there done that for a little bit, it's easy to go and like, yeah, I've done all of this before. It's easy to slip back into autopilot mode, and especially with the style that we're playing, it's really demanding. You always have to know what's happening. You have to be really aware of all the in-game timers. You have to make sure that you don't snooze and like go for an extra camp, go for an extra wave that you're not supposed to be going for. So getting that level of stimulation was really key for us, and I think Keith was really really vital in terms of being that out of game factor to bring the team together
Mm,
to enable the team across the board, right?
yeah.
The English has failed me there for a few seconds, but I hope you understood my
No,
point.
no, I get you. I mean, basically, Keith is not only stepping up huge to help maintain discipline on a team that it's one thing if he was trying to maintain discipline amongst a bunch of
Oh,
rookies.
don't get me wrong. By yelling, I don't mean as a scolding kind of
Oh no,
yelling.
no, no,
It's just the
yeah,
excited, let's go
yeah,
kind of things. The type of things that you just hear and you feel pumped up. You feel like I'm ready to fight. I'm ready to
right.
give this my all kind of feel. I'm like there. And I've heard stressful communication before where I'm sitting there and I feel stressed like hearing players communicate. Keith is the first player to make me as a coach sitting down there watching the game with communications and I'm feeling pumped. I'm feeling pumped just hearing him talk about the game when he goes and says, "What's the plan, guys?" Right?
Okay, okay.
You
So
you, you just feel it from the energy.
yeah, 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 yeah. Okay. So I misspoke. Discipline was not quite the right word, so my apologies on that. But maintaining morale and it's one thing to, as you said, to already be focused, especially in his role particularly, where he's trying to focus on his matchup and his lane and what his role is, but making sure to take that extra initiative to be the one creating that positive team morale environment, making sure that everyone is psyched and ready to go and play their best. Because it's definitely, as you said before, super easy to just slip into a complacent mentality where you're just like, yeah, we're here, don't really know what the plan is, but I got my champion, so I'm just gonna, do my thing and keep farming extra camps. But when you are psyched and everyone is on the same page as you, and also because of that person being Keith in this instance, get making everyone feel good and feel psyched to play this game, then everyone becomes more motivated and invested into like playing to the team's win conditions that are set, as early as the draft phase or even before that during the prep that you guys are doing. So that's really awesome to hear. And I think especially given how a lot of the matches played out, there needs to be more appreciation for Keith because I know a lot of the attention can always go more towards the top side of the map because Viper and Anda have been making a lot of the plays, but it's nice to see some appreciation go for Keith, and because that's the thing that you don't get to see on the game screen, right? You don't get to hear the comms. You don't get to hear what the pre-game rituals are like. You don't get to hear about the game speeches given by, the guy that is, hyping the rest of the team to play their best.
Honestly speaking, right, in my experience just coaching all over the world at this point, it's the players with these intangibles, I think, is they're such rarities and they're such treasures, like the ability to bring these out of game elements. Like you can get somebody who plays laning phase like 5% better, plays team fight like 10% better, or whatever, and for that type of improvement is something that you have to pay exponentially, right, cost wise to get if you're like trying to get players. But if you're looking at somebody, and this is what we call the clutch factor, right? You look at perks, they call it the perks factor. Why is it that he's able to find himself? We call it he's down 2-1 in the series. He never loses game four in all of those scenarios. It's the same thing. The ability to set themselves up, the ability to read the room, understand the awareness, and understand like what needs to be done, right? Like in spring, it was the opposite, right? Like I think there was a lot of pressure, there was a lot of stress, and I think some of the guys felt overstimulated by what needed to be done at the point of time. And then Keith was doing he wasn't he was doing a similar thing as well, but in the other direction to make sure that the rest of his team felt comfortable, felt that they were able to perform. And I think he's just really a treasure in terms of a player. Somebody who can read that, be able to bring that X factor within a team. And of course, speaking of other unsung heroes for things that people don't look at is of course Joey, and I think that this is something that people look at. I think he made like Team Seven Horizons Academy standouts last week because he went like one death throughout the entire two series or something. I'm not too sure about that, right? But one of the storylines that was happening for this team is that we had to have Pretty play for LCS in week 2, and in spring Pretty was the main shot caller for the team, and we wanted to use this opportunity to kind of reinvent the way the team was communicating, the way the team was processing information of sorts, right?
Mm,
Because Pretty's strength is that he's very good at micromanaging people. He's the StarCraft player playing League of Legends. He's out there. He can just micromanage 5 people and say, okay, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, right?
yeah,
And he received feedback that because he was micromanaging people so much, his individual play wasn't as good as it could be, because he constantly had to keep a leash on some of the players, making sure that they didn't go too far in the engages, making sure that they were resetting at the right times, going for the right waves, not over rotating in certain scenarios. So it was taking a taxing toll on him. And if you wanted to play in the LCS, where it's a different communication structure, where Xerxes and Destiny are the main callers for the main LCS team, then he has to play in a different way, right? And he had to
yeah,
raise his own level of performance. So we decided that, hey, let's swap over to Joy becoming the main caller for the team. And then that was another learning process that we started like midway through the season itself, where now Joey needs to be the person who is aware, taking in the information, what's happening in the wave states, what objective are we playing for, are we first on the map, who's faster, who should be going where, what's the lane assignments, and then he had to learn this entire new system, and then this gave the entire team a lot more ownership in terms of what was happening, instead of, okay, we're gonna go in there and then we're gonna ask what's the plan, and then Pretty's gonna tell us the plan, right? So it was a very big learning process, and I think Joey has definitely grown a lot in terms of learning as a shot caller. And I think that there's a certain like dip and a recovery for him as well. Like I think there's a particular down point where he felt that when he was going to some of the series, he just went there and he's just like rattling off the calls, and out of like instinct because of the pressure that was being placed upon him. But I think he's overcome that. We came in here throughout the series so far. He's there. Between he, Pretty, and Keith, they're coordinating the plans really, really well, making sure that everybody knows what's happening, is on the same page. And if you were to look at our games improving grounds compared to I would say about week 6, about week 5, and when we were playing Academy, look at the way the team is playing. We're so much more on the same page. Everybody knows what's happening. Everybody's there. We're always on time for the play. Sometimes but we're inting together as a team.
yeah. Okay,
Yep.
yeah, I appreciate that. And honestly, that is always a really remarkable thing to see in terms of growth, because stepping out of your comfort zone and being put into basically a leadership role can always, especially if you've haven't been one in quite some time, or for you know if you've always been a contributing voice but not the leading voice, stepping up to the plate, because it's not something that you can just tell someone, all right, start doing shot calling. It takes time, and it's a process, and
And I have to say, it's a very unique process on this team as well, because not only are you shot calling, for a team. You're short calling a team of experienced players with their own ideas as well. So as much
Yeah.
as I'm experiencing integration hell as a coach, working with all these players with different ideas, the short caller of the team has to work through that as well. He has to understand what does Andy want to do at this point of time, what does Viper want to do at this point of time, and how all of that comes together in regards to what's the overall game plan that's going to be occurring, right?
Hmm.
So for him to step up, not just with any roster, but this particular veteran roster, I think that's a very big growth in terms of character and development. I think a lot of times you go out there and you hear support saying that, yeah, I can be a team shot caller and stuff like that. You probably have to go through the rigors of this, right? It's one thing to show shot call for a rookie team, for an amateur team out there. It's
Yeah.
another thing to shot call. One, given a very finesse style of gameplay that I've given up on them. It's not like, hey, we're just gonna farm to this time, we group, and then we fight for Baron, right? Is you have to meet this timing, you have to recall this timing, you have to be in these places. It's a challenge because as a shot caller, you have to be very sensitive to these timings. You have to work with veteran players, right? There's certain egos, there's certain ideas that they're having. They're gonna talk over you. There's gonna be a lot of chaos and comms. How do you be efficient in that, and how do you command them to listen to you, or at least acknowledge that this is going to be the plan moving forward? And I think that when you're able to do that, then I can say, hey, you got to call yourself a shot caller.
Awesome. That's really, really just awesome to see how that has kind of led and helped Immortals Academy get this far. You know, top four now in Proving Grounds. Basically, a combination, not just the 10 Academy teams, but the 16 best teams across both amateur and academy. And you guys have progressed and made it this far. You know, it just makes me even more excited to see what happens on Friday when you guys play against Golden Guardians Academy, who, in their own right, have also made tons of progression and development as well. You know, going from a team that ended in the bottom four, going into Unified Grand Prix, where they had a surge as well. So this is going to be an exciting, really, really like just I can't even find the right words to just justify for how excited I am for this matchup. Before I let you go, Jensen, is there any other information that you would like to share with me to both fans, viewers of Proving Grounds, and any new time viewers who like are not that familiar with the Proving Grounds format and Academy overall about Immortals Academy?
I think when it comes to the strengths of, I've done a lot of sales. I've done quite a comprehensive sales pitch for Keith and Joey there for LCS teams to look at in terms of the type of players they're looking for. But when it comes to Viper, when it comes to Andy, when it comes to Bree, their performance on stage should speak for itself. I think should speak for itself. I think at this point of time, they're definitely top one, top two in their roles in Proving Grounds, as they've been showing in their performances. I definitely hope the LCS teams continue to look at them. But I'm going to steal, or rather borrow a quote from Yamato Cannon, right? And I think
Okay.
that this reflects Golden Guardian's season as well, right? When before the match before G2, he gave this quote, right? Precision beats speed, and G2 was speed, but we are precise. And then Fnatic then went on to beat G2 3-2. And I think that the same applies to us over here. There's some teams that start out fast, there's some teams that start strong, but for both us and Golden Guardians, we both started off a little bit slower, our own unique challenges and hiccups along the way. But this is about season planning, it's about being precise towards the end. And in this case, we have to see who is the more precise of the two. I hope I didn't botch the analogy there, right? But that's the kind of feel that we have here, right? Just start slow, finish strong. And it's the question of what's the strength of the finish. And at the end of the day, for those supporting Models Academy, I do believe that we have the overall highest ceiling for us to finish even stronger. Not just above Golden Gardens, but for the rest and win Proving Grounds.
As someone who appreciates Yamato Cannon phrases and quotes from many a time, especially since his speech for Team Vitality back in 2018 during their run at Worlds, going in, playing the best, excuse my language, fucking version of yourselves, play with confidence, and there's no match that you guys can lose. And they pulled off amazing upsets during the group stage, and I think it applies here as well. Just even if other teams in the same league got off to a better start faster than you guys, it's all about trusting the process and appreciating and taking the growth and development with patience, because then over time you do get to that end of the road and you see the goals that you visualize for yourself actualized in the end. Again, Jensen, thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you this Friday